Well, hello again, and welcome to another edition of our Heads Up podcast with our Coaches Council. And I'm really super excited about this opportunity, Mike. We have a couple very special guests with us today. We may have a third one join us, but for right now, we've got a couple that I would really like for you to introduce them because you've been working on this incredibly special project in the last few months. And I couldn't think of a better person to introduce these two because you're working so closely with. So, Mike, it's all yours.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. This has been great. In October, we lost Coach Greg Strobel, and he's been a legend in our sport, both coaching from the Olympic levels all the way down, and just a great human. His family reached out to us to talk a little bit about a developmental program that's not necessarily wrestling specific, but it's more life goals and life opportunities for our national team athletes. And so when Jen Baldwin called out, Jen is one of Greg's daughters. She reached out to USA Wrestling to talk about what that looks like. And so Jen, if I could introduce you, and I've had an opportunity to work with Chris here. Chris Ayres, the head coach at Princeton, on this. I know Chris wrestled for Greg and coached with Greg, so a lot of opportunities there. And then if Carrie McCoy is able to join, I know Greg got to coach him in the Olympics, and they worked together in coaching. And so just the legacy that your dad has brought to us. So maybe I could turn it over to you and just kind of learn a little bit more about how this kind of started up from your perspective.
Sure. I mean, I'd be happy to. I will tell you that it wasn't, obviously with losing dad was exceptionally difficult and difficult for everybody. So not just for our family, but our extended family. And certainly this community is an extension of our family. And as we were, the first few days after dad had passed away, my sister and I were just talking about, what do we do next? Because we don't believe for a second that what dad brought to his family and his larger family is over and done yet. And so I had reached out to Bruce Baumgartner actually as a starting point to just express an idea. Dad always believed in teaching life skills and life lessons beyond the mat. He really valued what people, did in their careers, did in their life, and really helped train wrestlers up to have a life beyond, maybe their wrestling career. And maybe that is into coaching or being an official or going into, what I like to call like the real world, if you leave wrestling at some point in your career. And so when I thought about, what could we do that really helps continue his legacy and bring the same teachings that he would have brought to athletes on the mat, how do we express that into some sort of a component that just allows us to keep pushing good content, right? For character, life skills, etc., to our athletes and beyond. So it was an ask that I honestly did not know where it was going to go, but I figured the worst thing that was going to happen is it was going to be a no-go. And I was just pleasantly and wonderfully surprised and honored that USA Wrestling thought it was a good idea. And we are really excited to continue to see it grow into what we believe it's going to be. So that's effectively how it started. It was with an idea of how do we keep dad's legacy alive? And we believe that was, with a purpose and intent. And we do think there's an audience for that.
That's awesome. I've always, in times of passing, I've always loved that we have two lives. Mm-hmm. We have the life that we're living, and then the second life ends when our name is spoken for the last time.
Right.
And I think it's going to be a long second life for Greg Strobel. I know that.
I hope so. So.
No doubt about it. This is so cool. And so then we needed some resources. So we started to think about how we can share the message, create some resources. Mm-hmm. And we came up with this fundraising program. And I know you and Chris and Chris's wife and a lot of folks really kind of jumped in, and this thing just blew up and has really gone really well. Maybe you guys could talk a little bit more about this fundraiser piece.
Well, I would like to start with one piece, and then Chris, I'm going to have you take over because Chris and I have known each other for a long time. We went to college together, right? So I've known Chris I actually probably would tell my dad I've known Chris longer than you did because I was there first at Lehigh. But this is very cool, and I'm going to have Chris tell the story because it is so wonderful how well he knows dad. And so he called me and just said, hey, I have an idea. And that was all I needed. I have an idea that we might be able to use for a fundraiser. And that's all I'm going to say. Chris, if you could please explain the rest. It's just awesome.
So it's pretty magical. We're having this podcast right now, and we're talking with USA Wrestling because it might have been about 2 months ago that we really started working on this thing. And how it happened was I had no idea she had been talking to USA Wrestling, but I was struggling with the passing of Greg. I had been with him 11 years as an athlete and a coach, and he really shaped who I am right now in a big way. And so, as I live my daily life, he's with me every day, even before he passed, because I'm sort of applying his teachings. And I'm also, I have this unique opportunity where I get to continue his teachings with my own team, put my little spin on it, my little Jersey spin on things, but, a little more edgy than maybe coach would like, but they're the same concept. So I was struggling with because of the pandemic, there wasn't a memorial. It was getting postponed. They were talking about doing that in the spring and summer. And for me, it just every day I was I felt like I needed to do something. And so randomly in my head, I was like, you know what, in his memory, I'm going to try to make my college wrestling weight. And so the reason I was going to do that is because Coach made his college wrestling weight every year. He made 197. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing for Coach in his memory. And it was just going to be by myself, basically. I was just going to do it for me and just so I had a connection with him. And then I was like, this could be a pretty cool thing. If I'm feeling this way, I'm sure tons of other Lehigh wrestlers are having the same issue with his passing and want to do something. So I was like, I bet you we could do a pretty cool fundraiser. And so as Jen said, we were freshmen together at Lehigh, and I met her before I'd even met her dad. And so I called her up and I was like, hey, I got this crazy idea. I'd like to do this make a weight fundraiser. I was like, hey, do you know what people could donate to? And then so she was like, that's funny because I just talked to Bruce, and I think she had already talked to you, Mike.
Yes.
And it was sort of already launched. So I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. So really for me, it was figuring out how to deal with this, his passing, but then it became something bigger, which has been totally amazing, pulling in so many people. And I feel so much better. I'm obviously his passing still hurts, but I feel like we did something great in his honor. And it was great that Jen and I could connect on this. And USA Wrestling is doing what they're doing to preserve his legacy.
Mm-hmm. And it's been such a successful program. We've raised over, $15,000?
Yes.
Already?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, over $15,000. And it is outstanding because I just want to iterate something. When Chris says there was an idea and it had to do a lot with just kind of dealing with and trying to figure out, how to comprehend and work through emotionally what had happened with Dad passing away. And so it's interesting that this started out as what can we do to feel close to him? I had no idea what to expect. And I don't think Chris did either. I didn't know if this was going to be I didn't know how it would be received other than I think we knew it felt right. And in light of the fact that we have, the academy being started, and we knew, Mike, as you and I have talked, quite a bit on, what are some things we want to do for that curriculum to make it be successful and impactful and really provide some really good content to our athletes. It really just seemed to all come together, and so we had an opportunity to do something unique in his honor that raised some really good funds for what I can only imagine is going to be a really, really great program. So, I'm pretty much still in awe. I can't stop smiling about it because I just think it is so cool. It's just so neat. And we're very thankful for the support of USA Wrestling and everybody that's participated. It's outstanding.
But I know you guys started the 30-day Greg Strobel or the Strobel 30-day challenge Facebook page.
We did.
And every day during the 30-day challenge, you had a new post about Greg, about his message, about his life. and the challenges. I even one, I love it, where he's a picture of him and you're like, what's he thinking?
Oh yeah.
And he's thinking like, you need to get off your butt and get working and make this
Yes.
happen. I love to be able to follow this because you really get a version of what your dad was going through those daily messages. So everybody should jump on Facebook and go Strobel 30-day challenge.
Yes.
Join that group and stay with us because this is going to happen every year, right?
Well, that's our goal. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to stop something that's awesome once you start, you know? And also I just want to mention too, and yes, you're right with the Facebook page, you know, it was a combined effort for sure. And Chris and I trying to tag team how we wanted to communicate with an audience. So we have an Instagram page, a Facebook page, and a Twitter handle. I think that's what they're called, Chris, right? So we have Twitter also. And yeah, that was really neat to do that every single day of the 30 days. We really wanted to offer something that was unique. So some was very family oriented, as that's one of the pillars for the Academy. A lifetime of good habits, we talked about a lot. Discipline and accountability. I mean, it really all was woven together with real purpose and intent so that people could make a connection to him. And my hope then through this is that over time, they continue to make that connection. I mean, I had 2 people start following our Instagram page today. It's awesome. I mean, the word is definitely getting out there and I'd love to see that continue.
That's cool. Mike, I know you've had a lot of experience working with Greg and I know he was close with you. Like, how is this kind of set with you? How does this opportunity to honor his legacy, how does this impact us as the family that wider family that's known him for so long and loved him?
Well, I think you guys touched on it early, is that, Mike, you're saying, or your quote in regards to, living the 2 lives, is that you live until you wear out this body, but then you also live until your name is spoken last. And I think Greg's impact is just overwhelming, and what he meant in the wrestling community, not only to people that he had direct influence on, but families and other folks that he touched in indirect ways. And I'm sitting here watching Jennifer and her enthusiasm. And that's one thing that you obviously inherited from Greg. You have that smile that just keeps going. And it's like, sometimes I even wondered, and times at USA Wrestling, it can get a little stressful in the office, and I'd walk into Greg's office and he'd still be smiling. And it's like, dude, what are you smiling about? It's like, we're under siege right now. We're under attack. And you're sitting here smiling. So those are the things that I really remember a lot about Greg. And Greg's willingness to me was that he really didn't, even though he coached at the Olympic level and he coached some high level athletes in college as well, he was just as willing to coach young athletes, work with anybody that asked for any help at all. Greg was always willing to step up and be that guy. And, over time, I think that perpetuated the wrestling community, and people kind of knew him for that. Greg really didn't carry that ego. It was just simply about if a job needed to get done, he would do it. If somebody needed help, he was there to help. And that's how I remember Greg.
Yeah. And I love that. And actually I would say then you must be a very good friend of Dad's, because I think that is true, right? I mean, that is totally true. And one thing that I really am impressed by from him that I too want to do, and I think anybody in his sphere of influence, I hope does also, is just give away that knowledge freely, is what I call it. Dad didn't hold what he knew hostage. He gave of himself very much in a very humble way. And I was always impressed by that. Right. I mean, in the family setting, it's kind of funny because, my kids didn't really understand who he was until he passed away, in a lot of respects, because, to him, he was grandpa, to them, he's grandpa. And it's been really, and I think that's really fascinating, because I think that's something that if I take it outside the family, I do think that's something Dad always did very well, is remain humble, share with others, give beyond himself, pay it forward, be willing to participate in anything. And I mean, I just think, I know for myself and for my family, I mean, I want us to continue that as well.
I think that's a great point too, Jen. It's that Greg was also, it was very visible that Greg was more than just wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he was about wrestling, he was more than wrestling.
Yeah.
And he certainly was able to carry those other parts of his life forward and demonstrated that within the family, and he enjoyed life. There's nobody
For
that
sure.
enjoyed life anymore, from his biking to fishing. And like I said, I've got a little bit of a story I was going to share with you about that, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But he really did enjoy life. He was out in front of everything.
Yeah.
For that more than wrestling, Chris, how does the more than wrestling piece tie in here?
Yeah, I mean, I've totally adopted his philosophy with my own team. I mean, wrestling's basically just a vehicle for teaching life lessons, and that's it. And that's my sort of, I view myself as a coach that's trying to get wins on the mat. But much like him, the wins were really like after they were done wrestling, and being able to use the tools that he gave you, because he was unique that way. I mean, it was just about every day he would sit us down at the beginning of practice. There'd be wrestling talk, 30% of the time, but then the other 70% would be, the character traits that make you good in wrestling that also carry on in life. We'd be focusing on those things. And so yeah, it was just a different way of coaching. And I had other coaches that did that, but he took it to a whole nother level. And the funny thing about the attitude, you were joking that, USA Wrestling was under siege and he had a smile. The amazing thing was, like, when his body was under siege with cancer and how he was fighting that. Like, when I would talk to him, I'd call him and I'd expect to be like, he had his moments. Obviously, it's such a hard thing to do, but for the most part, he'd be like talking about his wounds, like how they cut him open, and like the doctor did this really neat thing where he tied it like this, and he's like smiling about it. So like, never mind USA Wrestling being under siege, like he was under siege with cancer and he beat it, and I think a lot of the reason he beat it is because he had that attitude. And that's just one thing. The number one thing I took from him is, though, just you control your attitude.
That's right.
He chose to smile in those hard times when it was supposed to be really stressful. He used to say pressure is what you put on yourself, and it's in your control. And so same thing with attitude. You're a human. It's the greatest gift. You get to wake up and choose your attitude every morning.
Right.
And he chose a very positive attitude. And there's so many other things he taught, but I would say, what I took from him was not like, here's how you finish a high single, which I did get that from him too. But I did take the larger life lessons from him, which were awesome. It was every day he was teaching us lessons. It was great.
Yeah.
If I'm a grassroots coach and I'm hearing this and I'm like, you know what? I like what I'm hearing. I want to buy in. I want to be more about my athletes. I want to be more about their future and not just their success. Where do I start? Where do I start to do what Greg did? And maybe how did he start off with that kind of positivity?
Well, I'll tell you, let me just joke, because this is really important, because this changed me and my wrestling, because I thought wrestling was something completely different. He said, wrestling is inherently fun.
Yeah.
If you put a couple kids in a room that are 5 years old, they'll start wrestling and they love it.
Yeah.
And he used to say this speech every year as the first speech, and then he'd say, and then what happens is you throw coaches in the mix. So the coaches get in the mix and they screw it all up, and they make it not fun anymore. And they make it about, the winning and losing. So at that time too, this is 1996, I think. Iowa's the team. And if you watch the videos, they just, they're puking and it looks like they hate life, but they're good at wrestling, and so it was a different time period. And I have Greg here who's like, this is fun. This is kind of neat. Like, you should have fun with wrestling. I was like, that wasn't computing, but I needed that, because that pressure thing, I made it such a serious thing in my life that it was like life or death, whether I won or not. And he was so not that. It was about like having fun. And
that's right.
I could tell a million stories about speeches after matches and stuff where we just were blown away that he wasn't like pissed off at us. He's pretty calm. But so the first thing I'd say is, like, figure out how to make wrestling fun and figure out how to keep it fun. because don't be the coach that screws it up and makes it all serious, although it should be serious, but you got to kind of trick them into thinking that even hard work is fun. So I would say grassroots coaches, that's what he would definitely would probably be his first speech would be like, keep it fun.
Yeah. And if I could add to that, one of the things I was thinking is you were talking about fun. One of my favorite things he always said, and it is useful on the mat and off, is relax, have fun, and see what you can do. And that is for everything. And what I always thought about that too is Dad first and foremost wanted it to be fun. And I would offer, and I'm not a wrestling coach, I've just grown up in a wrestling household, is I think coaches, for me, my perspective is, to that point, is let the kids have fun and enjoy themselves. And yes, it's serious. And yes, there is intention and there's things that we want to see happen or that should be happening. But I think coaches having a genuine, sincere interest in the kids that they are working with is really mission critical, because I think that the relationship between coach and athlete is only as good as that relationship. So if that's not built in a really positive way that is bigger picture than a win or a loss, I think that kids have an opportunity to just be like, forget this, I'm not doing this, I don't like this coach, and I'm not going to wrestle for him or her, right? I think it really is beyond that. And I think if you can get to a space, as Chris said, that's keeping it fun and interesting, serious but not too serious, laughing at yourself just a little bit, but coaches recognizing what they're there for and their purpose is really important, because it's not just, in my opinion, teaching technique, and it's not just a win-loss. It's everything that those kids are going to take from a sport that truly allows growth and development in a very different way, in my mind, than maybe even other sports that are out there. So that would be my 2 cents.
It's amazing.
I was going to ask a real quick question of both of you, and this might be a tougher one. You've had some softballs here to hit. All right, these have been easy ones. Here's a tougher one for both of you guys. What's something from your perspective that very few people would know about Greg that you could share?
Very few people would know.
Well, it's very challenging because he loved to talk. He loved to tell stories.
That's true.
Like, he would tell you. I mean, I worked with him. I'd come into the office. It would be a 30-minute talk about his whole afternoon and night from the day before.
Right.
So he would fill me in on everything. And that was the thing. Like, talk about love and life. He'd be talking about like cooking pasta or something.
Yes.
I'd be like, Coach, you want me to recruit guys?
Eating peppers. Don't eat peppers. He used to eat peppers. He used to raise peppers,
yes,
but don't eat them now, because I learned this. And I heard like I bet an hour on peppers. It's like, I don't care. I won't eat them, Greg.
Yeah. Well, to Chris's point, Dad spoke a lot about a lot of things and bobbed and weaved it all into these massive stories. But maybe one thing, and I don't know why this comes to mind, except for that, Dad has talked before, and Chris mentioned, like, a surgery or going through chemo or those type of things. And in some of the paperwork that I have of my dad's, after his passing, there's a piece of paper that he had in a safe. And on this piece of paper, it outlined every single surgery he's ever had and what they're for. And
Wow.
He has had 17 surgeries in his lifetime. He had 17 surgeries. And when I look back in time, and so there's a connection here. When I think back at that, and I didn't realize he kept track of them, or really, quite frankly, why he felt compelled to. But when I marry that up to other things that I've found from him, or things that he has notes in his phone, or I've seen some coaching notes he has, they are monumental periods in time for him that I've seen him write about somewhere else. And one of the things that I liked about seeing that is, if you think about it, right? I mean, growing up, I knew he had many, but through all of those, he still was joyful and had a great day. And I don't know, 17 surgeries. I guess that's one thing I don't know if anybody knew, but 17.
Wow.
I know. I saw him break one time, so I know what will break him. So I saw him break one time. Pat Santora will confirm this for me. So 1 year at Lehigh, we used to do 3 weeks of camp. And this is when it was building. It was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So this 1 year, we're going to do 4 weeks of camp. And they're like back to back to back. and there's 900 kids coming. And so by the last week, the whole staff was shot. And I saw him and Santoro get at it a little bit, and it was a little him breaking on this thing, and then Santoro was fired up and he broke a little bit. So it's probably the one time I saw him like kind of break a little bit and not be like, oh, this is kind of neat. We have this freaking crazy camp with 900 kids. I mean, I was like the behavior guy, so I had like sent home 5 kids and like, so it was just it was crazy. And we didn't. So after that camp, I don't think we like talked to each other for about a week afterwards. Then it was good though. After about a week, we all got back together. We're like, okay, we gotta get these guys ready.
The moral of
Jen,
the story.
you were probably working that camp.
Oh,
right?
I'm pretty sure I was, because I remember thinking like, I don't see my dad get mad or yell, and I'm like, I'm not gonna hang out in this environment. I don't.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Not 900 campers at a wrestling camp. We'll break in.
He reached his maximum at 900 kids.
Yeah,
After that,
right. God.
That's awesome. Mike?
So I'm always fascinated with coaching philosophies, because if I know my coaching philosophy and I know my values, when it hits the fan, I'm probably going to make better choices.
Mm-hmm.
How important, I know we talk about the 4 core values that he carries, and we're carrying that on to the senior national team. How important were those core values in his philosophy in his life? And if he ever had to change, or if somebody ever challenged him, how did he handle that?
Chris, you want to take that first?
Yeah, so it's interesting you talk about coaching philosophy, because that was one of the things he would express to the team a lot. He said, how can the team get behind a philosophy if the coach doesn't even know his own philosophy?
Mm-hmm.
So he was very explicit about his coaching philosophy. I've carried that over to Princeton. We have this whole higher standard manual. We have the philosophy written out of a coaching staff. We have like what we think are the most important character traits. It's a book basically, but I basically got that from him, the idea. And, those were ingrained in everything we did. It was interesting. His, the attitude, the discipline, he would point to those things in everything we did. And he was a great storyteller. So it was like, man, he had just a million stories to go along with what he was teaching. And the core pillars we picked, I mean, there's more, but I think those really expressed what was important to Greg, I think, at the end of the day. And I think the cool thing about this whole project was everyone could express them in some way throughout the project. It was a challenge and your attitude, discipline. And so like we could put those things in it, and everybody's focusing on those things. And weight loss, that's what you need in anything in life. You need those character traits. That's what's going to carry you, not some diet or anything like that. And that's what carries you in wrestling. So I would say it was daily that he instilled that, but I think it's really important. His philosophy was very explicit. It wasn't, we weren't trying to figure out what was important to him. We knew it was important to him as athletes and coaches.
Yeah, I agree. And I would add to that too, that when I think about it wasn't just his coaching philosophy, it was his life philosophy. So what he coached, my sister and I grew up, we were running around on the mats our whole lifetime, and we could hear him with athletes and at various calibers. So whether it was in Roseburg when he coached in high school, or in college, or at an elite level, or whatever, we heard the same thing. So when I think about that, and that was what we heard at home too, maybe the conduit was a little bit different, right? I mean, he's our dad, it's our life. I mean, he's making sure he's raising us, him and my mom raising us well. But I would say it's a life philosophy that he was able to very, very easily articulate through coaching, if that makes sense. And I think that's because he knew himself first, and he knew what he valued. And I don't personally see over time so much that changed as he grew up in his coaching career, as much as he probably began to know himself better, if that makes sense. And I know he was very much a listener to others, or what are other people doing, or what would they say? I mean, he was a big believer in mentors and people that I think guided him along the way, obviously. But I think life philosophy, knowing who you are first, understanding what your purpose is and what do you want to see accomplished. And then it starts with you. And I think that that's something that he did very well, as Chris was talking about attitude, and you can choose that. My dad woke up every day and decided what that was going to look like. He didn't let it happen to him. He decided, right? So if he was going to be, joyful and take the day on as it was, regardless of the circumstance, that's what he did. And I think that that's really important. And you can take that into coaching too, in terms of how you influence and educate other people. So that'd be what I think about that.
How important is that? I heard when Kenny Rogers had passed away, they'd done an interview, and he said that the successful people that he had seen, they knew who they were. Mm-hmm. Other people knew who they were. And then there's the truth. And the closer the three of those perceptions were, mm-hmm. the more successful you could be. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody doubted that your his truth was, that's what he lived. It's how he coached. They were all three so close together. Mm-hmm. It had to be such a big part of his success.
I would think so. I can speak from a family perspective. He was he was the same guy to us all the time, right? When we'd see him coaching or we'd be with him in different spaces, he wasn't a different person anywhere. He was the same person with the same philosophy and taught the same thing all the time, because everything he taught, quite candidly, I think was transferable in everything. I've, seen him coach athletes, and then, if I had something going on, whatever, doing something good or bad, whatever, I can remember Dad being like, Jennifer, let's talk about this, or let's understand, what could you have done different or better? Or, hey, let's understand why this maybe wasn't the best choice, or what could be done different. And I think about that is transferable all the time. And I don't know, I don't think he swayed very far, if ever, from himself and what people knew about him. People that talk about him, I feel the same way, because he was the same guy to me as he was to everybody else, minus being my dad. And obviously, it's really hard not having him, but we all saw the same guy. And I think that's tremendous and a testament to him, truly.
Can I add to that? So it's there's those two things where it's what you think of you and what people think of you. And then there's what you tell people to do, or what you tell people they should do, and what you do. And so he made weight every year. He made his college weight every year. So he didn't just, talk the talk. He wanted to, he not only wanted to teach us through telling us and, and giving us the information, he lived it exactly like he was saying we should do it. So it was an incredible thing that you don't really see all the time. Mm-hmm. I think it made him very unique. Mm-hmm. His level of willingness to push himself was second to none. Yeah. He did crazy shit all through his life. He was a wild man, in terms of working out and just trying to get everything he could out of life. And he was a great example for everyone who wrestled for him and everyone who was around him. So I would say he practiced what he preached too, which was really important.
He made it very easy to follow him as a leader. I will tell you that,
Mike, this might be a question for you as well. For the three of you, I would ask, where is the Greg Strobel project headed, and what's the future for the Greg Strobel project? And now that it's been moving, it raised $15,000. It's touching countless lives, obviously, and many coaches. What's the future of the Greg Strobel project?
Jen, do you feel more comfortable, or would you like me to tackle that one?
Oh, well, I feel like we're pretty aligned, but I'm happy to
go for it.
Share. You share. You start. How about that? I'll piggyback off what you say.
Well, there you go. We're aligned, so we know we're going to be successful. Yes. The truth, it's all good. We have the opportunity now with the resources and the concept of this program. We had just built a high school aged athlete leadership development course, and we had just done our first version of that course. Just as this was starting. So our first goal at USA Wrestling was to start this at the high school age and then figure out how we were going to get it developed at the youth and at the senior level. So when this came about, it was something that was important for us. It was in the same direction. We were just able to jump on it a little bit earlier. So, I know we're getting ready before the Olympics. We're going to have all three of our teams training in one location. Those are going to be opportunities for us to bring in a special speaker or a special message that helps our senior national athletes bond, right? Because it's not really three teams, it's wrestling, right? We've got men's and women's freestyle and Greco, but we all help each other and we all grow together. So to be able to share more of that message and to help bring our teams closer together and to make sure that they've got the tools that they need, whether it's financial management. It's a little bit of marketing. So how can our senior team athletes get out and market themselves so that we can help them with their training? So I think there's going to be a lot of different directions that this can go. But the goal is, how can we provide that resource for our senior team athletes so that they can be the people, other people can see them that way, and the truth, all three of those are really close together. And I think we've got a lot of great athletes that can share that as well, and with their message as we grow.
Absolutely. And I think that from like when we've been talking about content and some focus areas, I really, when I think about the program and what, as Mike said, we're able to do now because we have an avenue, right? We were able to do it maybe sooner, is really, really thinking about what it means to be good stewards in this wrestling community and what that means for our athletes. So how do we support them at a different level, perhaps? And what does that mean for them, to Mike's point about, as they're out in their communities, what can they do to also, bring the right messaging and the right information to other athletes who are wondering if they should even participate in this sport, right? So it's really an opportunity to even teach them some skills on, and if they don't have them today, how they can just be truly just good stewards of the sport of wrestling. And as they represent USA Wrestling, really helping, giving them some of those resources and creating the village that helps provide that. So as Mike said, whether it's guest speakers or other people that can come in and share their opinions or their expertise, their wisdom, I think it's just going to be very cool. And we're looking at doing a curriculum. I think we talked about, Mike, once a year, right? So we've got a national team every year, so they would be the focus areas. And then we've got a great 30-day challenge that helps support in a different way our ability to be able to do that. So, it's going to be exciting to see what continues to happen, honestly.
I think that's really awesome. And the one thing that I can say as just one single member, but do represent as the Coaches Council, we want to promote in any way, shape, or form from USA Wrestling, our volunteer group of Coaches Council members, to try to help in any way that we possibly can to move and serve as a conduit for this as well.
Which I think is wonderful. And like I said, it takes a village, right? It's not just one person and it's not just one style. I think there's a great opportunity to get, when you get, I'll call it, the right people in the room to communicate really good things on how something can be better, be done different, or really support our athletes as they do what they do. It's great to have support because, number one, I think we're going to need it. And it's a great way to make sure that we're challenged and that people hear great things from many sources, not just one. And I think that's important. So thank you.
There is one thing that you had said, and for everybody on the call, that just really struck out to me. We have this opportunity because he led by example, because he told us the right things to do. But you guys also mentioned how he would ask you the questions. So you had to work your way through the choices, self-efficacy. Right. We train that now at our youth level for Copper, for 12 and under, coaching 12 and under. Our athletes need to be able to make choices and understand that their choices have consequences.
That's right.
How important was that piece where he asked you to talk through it in your development for both of them?
Chris, you want to take that first?
Yeah, it kind of went with he's very inquisitive, is what I would say. He got into things and he'd be very interested and he would tell you all about like fly tying, or, he was into woodworking. He was very much, or to peppers, and then he gets out of peppers, but he very much would get into things. And I think he was just curious. And so he was great at asking you questions that would really make you think about yourself. So it wasn't, like you said, it's perfect what you said, Mike. It wasn't about always telling you, right? Because the best thing he did, probably, that I learned from him coaching wise, was it was a team for sure, but he was very individualistic with how he approached each athlete. So, and I'm the same way, and it's extremely challenging to be that way. It's much easier to say, hey, you're going to listen to me, all of you. You're going to do what I'm going to tell you to do, and that's it. If you don't do it, then you don't fit in, and you're out of here. But he was very one-on-one, and he just asked great questions, and it forced you to be a thinker. And it forced you to be inquisitive too. And it was technique wise. It was funny. He would say to me, like, I didn't wrestle like you, so you should watch this guy. And fortunately, he worked at USA Wrestling, so he had this video collection. And he'd say, hey, you should watch this guy do this thing. And so it was like, then you took the tape home and you had to go figure out like what he wanted you to do. So it was sort of like he was leading that horse to water, but you know, he wasn't forcing him to drink.
Yep.
If you want to drink, you could be really good.
Yeah.
So I think he led you, and I find myself doing this too. In our program, I say it's partnerships, not dictatorship. And that's really what I view our team as. And I send out questionnaires about how we're doing as coaches, and I want feedback. And so he was very individualistic, would always treat everyone different. So I think that inquisitiveness got him to that point for sure.
And I think to add to that too, what I noticed is I think he was really teaching, he did even through adulthood, right? He's teaching you how to grow up and own what's yours, right? Owning who you are and the attitude you bring into the space around you, you know, who you are around other people, you know, understanding your audience, understanding the dynamics of what's going on with you. And so to Chris's point, I don't think he was a teller as much as a drawing something out in you for you to figure out who you are, and then for you to own what's yours. And why I think that's important when I think about discipline and accountability, you know, for example, if I mess up, that's on me first. That's how I think about it. And then I figure out what could have been done different or how else or who else contributed. But we kind of always grew up with it's me first, because I had a choice or I had to figure out what I wanted to think or feel about this or that. And I think Dad did a really nice job of doing that with us as individuals, right? My sister and I. And I saw that with his athletes too. I mean, he didn't treat everybody the same. And I think that's totally okay, because we're not all the same. We're in fact very different, very diverse. We grew up in different spaces. We're different ages. We do different things. So to treat everybody the exact same, he probably wouldn't have gotten for himself a very good result. And he would not have gotten the best out of his athletes, because I really believe for him to really help support that development, it's getting to know the athlete first and helping them be at their optimum, not my dad's optimum, but their optimum. Because if they're operating at their best, right, and they're their best version, their best athlete, and he's helping to tweak it, people understand why they're doing what they're doing. I think you have a much greater opportunity for growth than just someone telling you what to do. And I don't think that's a good life skill anyway, just to tell people what to do. That's just
well said, Jen. Coach Jennifer.
We're going to recruit
you. All right, we're at the time of the show where if I don't tell my story, I won't tell it. So I'm going to tell my story about Greg, right? And this is after we had both obviously had long retired from USA Wrestling, and we were going in different directions. And but we're volunteering at a camp out at USA Wrestling. It was one of our national team camps, and Greg and I are roommates. And so Greg says, "Hey, Hag," he says, let's go fishing." And of course, I'm not a big fisherman. I like to do it. I'm just not very good at it. And so Greg convinces me that we're going to go fly fishing on the Colorado River. And it's a little jaunt to get to the Colorado River from Colorado Springs, but we take off and we drive over there. And one thing I was really excited about is that my grandfather was a big fly fisherman, and I never fly fished with him. And I always kind of wanted to do it. I was too small, and there's some coordination that takes place with fly fishing that's a lot different than normal fishing. But Greg was very patient. I mean, he was awesome. He showed me exactly how to do it. I threw it out, I let it float down. And so we're out there fishing the Colorado River, and I'm loving it, because I'm thinking my granddad, who passed away a long time ago, he would be proud of me. Yeah. And I'm learning a new skill, and I'm actually catching on to it. The only problem is neither one of us were catching any fish. And Greg, one thing about it, Greg let you know that he was pretty good at fishing, right? Yeah. So I'm like, well, at least I'm not a lot worse than you are, because I don't have any fish and you don't have any fish. So we're in the river and we're out there for quite a while. And the one thing about Greg is he's persistent. And so we stayed out there for like 2 hours in the Colorado River, and we moved to these places, and he goes, I know there's fish over there. There's this is the perfect spot. He would cast that line out, and it would run down the stream. Nothing. Well, finally, it even tried his patience, and he gave up. It was like,
Oh.
I don't know what's going on, but we're done. So he was like, we got out of the water, and we get up to the edge, and there's this guy that was I guess he was a park ranger, had a uniform on, and he came over and he said, "How's the fishing going, fellas?" And not so good, not a very good day in the river today. We didn't catch anything. He goes, "Well, no wonder. They've got the river dammed up here. It's not being stocked until tomorrow." So there were no trout. There were no fish. So we fished for 2 hours in a place where there was absolutely
no fish.
in the Colorado River where there was absolutely no fish.
That's amazing.
That is a great story.
Like for me, I had a great experience.
Yeah.
It was fun. I learned how to fish, how to fly fish. I think Greg was a little disappointed because his competitive edge was he wanted to catch some fish. But that was a great story, and I'll never forget it as long as I live.
That's awesome.
Greg taught me how to fly fish in a river that had no fish in it.
Yeah. I can guarantee you he was bewildered and had no idea why that was happening.
No, he was frustrated.
Well,
I was just having fun doing this.
Oh, heck yeah. Oh, that is a great story.
That's awesome.
That was a few years ago, but it sticks in very, very refined points in my brain that I'll never forget. So
that's fun. That's very fun.
So make sure that folks know they can go to the Facebook page, Strobel 30-Day Challenge. That'll keep them up to date on everything that's going on. They can go to themat.com and click on the donate button. And then in the comments section, they can put Greg Strobel Leadership Academy.
Perfect.
And they can still take funds. So we are still accepting that opportunity there. Any other links or things that we should be talking to our viewers about so that they can stay involved?
Well, so we do have an Instagram page as well. So we do have Instagram also. That is at Strobel Legacy Project. And we do have a Twitter page, and that's at Strobel Legacy. So we do have both of those as well. And we do try to provide some different content and information in those at varied times. So, I think it's worth probably following all three because we do post different things. And our intentions are that we continue to post some content over time, right? As things happen, we still need to finalize this particular challenge and then talk about, kind of what some additional communications are. So there'll be more to come for anyone that follows those so that they can get some of those Strobel-ism anecdotes or whatever, because he definitely had a lot to say and share. And we want to make sure we continue to do that and keep his legacy alive going forward.
Awesome.
Well, Jennifer and Chris both, man, it's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you guys on our show. And I know that the coaches in particular are going to get a lot out of this. Anybody that tunes in, I think, would enjoy the podcast this week. So we certainly appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedule to jump on with us. And hope anytime you have any updates on the Greg Strobel Project, let us know and we'll get you back on. So thank you so much. And for Mike Clayton, Mike, thank you for being a part of what we do. And I'm Mike Haggerty. Until next time, we'll see you guys. Have a good one.
Guys. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.